Flipping on Copilot chat at work gets them started on their adoption journey, getting used to how to interact with the technology. But it also helps the organization stay safe because you have that enterprise grade security still wrapped around it.
Hi, and welcome back to the Teams Insider podcast. This week, we're going deep into Microsoft Copilot, but in a very practical conversation about what customers are actually doing. I talked to Sarah Miller, who's product marketing manager for Copilot in the UK. Really great conversation with her. Thanks to her for taking the time out. We get into what agents are, what the use cases are, and how you can be successful. And also many thanks to Crestron, who are the sponsor of this podcast. Really appreciate their support of Empowering Cloud. On with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Exciting conversation this week. We're getting a little bit wider than Teams. We're going to talk about Copilot, and obviously that's massively influencing us in the team space, but the whole Microsoft 365 stack, and I guess the whole world at the moment. Very fortunate, Sarah and I ended up on a webinar together in the last couple of months and got chatting, and she's kindly agreed to come on the podcast. So Sarah, do you just want to introduce yourself and give a little bit of context about your current role?
Yeah, thanks, Tom, for having me. I am Sarah Miller. I am the product marketing manager for Copilot here in the UK. What that actually means is it's my role to help customers understand the value that assistive and generative AI can bring to their organizations, as well as realizing that value. So what can they do now that they have it to implement it to drive up that adoption?
I love the realizing the value bit. I think that's that's where we really are in kind of end of 24 and into 25. Is like everybody knows AI is here now. Everybody understands it's going to have an impact, but how do I as an organization drive value out of it?
100%. I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road, right? It's nice to have a pretty new tool, but until you're using it and getting that value out of it, you don't really get to experience the aha moment that we hope for.
What is your day-to-day look like? I mean, that seems like a huge challenge. We were just talking off camera about how much is changing and how you communicate that. And I know you have a customer user group. You work a lot with customers. What does it look like? Yeah,
so I'll start with the external part of my role because that's the more fun bit, because it's where I get to present to customers, to talk through and sort of dig into what they're trying to achieve with AI. And I always say it's really important to be clear on your North Star goal. Because having the toolkit is great, but unless you know what you're solving for, that's what you want to always ladder back up to. So I'm presenting to customers, I'm doing workshops. We host events called promptathons where we invite business folks to come and get hands-on with some demo devices. So even if they don't have it in their organization, they can get hands-on with the technology and have a play with it. And they solve business challenges. They win prizes at the end of the day. So this is all in the category of trying to get Copilot into the hands of business people, the people who are going to be using it. Though, we love our IT folks. IT is how we get it into the hands of the business. We really need to have our business counterparts, so people across different disciplines, marketing, finance, legal, to get their hands on the technology so they can really see that aha moment. So that's external facing. I'm also working with marketing to make sure that we're harping on the right value, especially for the UK, where we are currently. There's so many great things that the UK government is coming out with. We want to make sure we're harping on that and how it's really a priority for the UK. And then, of course, internally, I'm curating all the news that's coming our way and making sure that our people are equipped to have the best, most up-to-date conversation.
That's awesome. Yeah, so just the 2 or 3 roles, it sounds like.
On a good day, yes.
And what is Sarah? I mentioned your perspective on the UK as a global audience on the podcast, but from my world in UC, actually the UK was quite progressive in terms of first of VoIP phones and very progressive on that. Where are we on the global scale in terms of AI adoption and AI interest?
I always say I'm so lucky to live in this country, which is so able and willing to push the envelope on what's next. And that's because I think organizations are specifically really interested in driving up, our GDP per capita. They want to push the envelope. They want to stay competitive. I mentioned the UK government earlier. On, I think it was like the 13th of January, they released this really impressive AI opportunities action plan, which is basically the UK government saying, let's roll out the red carpet for AI. We want to stay competitive in the global market. So that means that we need our organizations to invest today. So I love working here and being here because I do feel like we're kind of pushing the envelope every day.
That's awesome. There's a few places I want to go in terms of what individual customers are doing, where they're seeing value, but maybe we should start at tail end of last year and definitely into 25. Agents, agentic is the term, not just with Microsoft, but in the wider industry. Can you kind of decode that for us? What does that mean in practical terms?
Yeah. So what is an agent? This terminology that people are starting to toss around, and I'm so happy they are. What we like to say is every person has a copilot, this generative AI assistant, and every business process has an agent. So you can think of an agent as a specialty AI assistant that's been pre-designed or prompted preemptively to do a specific set of tasks, or maybe its scope has been directed toward a specific set of documents or resources. So maybe a good example would be like a legal contracts agent. Whereas you might want to use Copilot to spin up a legal contract or to check a legal contract. If this is a process that you're going to be doing repeatedly and you have a standard way of doing it, rather than going back to Copilot and prompting for this process every single time, you can basically design an agent where you can tell the agent, this is the way this process functions. This is the standardized format I want to see it. I'm going to be asking you questions like X, Y, Z. And then you've created a specialty AI assistant. And you don't need to be some sort of coder who's created this assistant. You can just use your natural language to create that assistant yourself. So agents we've seen have really catapulted into the market because when we're thinking of those aha moments or ways to realize value, tying it to business processes is one of those surefire ways that we see organizations starting to really take up generative AI.
Yeah, I love that, and I think I'm really aligned to that business value conversation of actually a lot of the AI talk in kind of consumer land is like chat based, like you can drive it to do things, but it feels much more practical to grab onto. You have people doing this process that's like move this from here to here, summarize this, fill in this form, do this thing, and the fact that the AI can augment or replace that capability and free that person up. And from a business point of view, it's great, right? It's like consistency, it's procedure, and it doesn't have to be like the AI comes up with, something more creative, like come up with a marketing plan. It could just be very line of business type scenarios.
Yeah, it's a much more streamlined way of using AI. And I also think it helps both the end user, so the people in your organization. We say Copilot is the UI for AI. That's that common user interface that you can interact with AI. So therefore that familiarity and as they learn how to interact and how to prompt to get the answer that they want, they only get better because it's consistent. And then from a governance point of view, you have this one pane of glass with which you can manage all these different business processes. Whereas before, maybe you had like different point solutions that you were trying to cobble together that would be really hard to manage.
That makes sense. And what is that like, drilling down on agents, what does that look like? Because you've got Microsoft doing first party agents. So take like a Dynamics product, for example, they will frame agents in teams. We've got facilitator, interpreter coming. Those are agents, but those are built ready to work for the customer. And then what you're talking about here is more line of business. Is that Copilot and Copilot Actions? Is that Copilot Studio? Is it proper code? What's that look like?
Yeah, you raise a good point. So a couple things in that. There are agents that are now included out of the box right within a Microsoft 365 Copilot license. And those are agents that we saw just so frequently being built that we thought, hey, like, let's just put it in the hands of our customers pre-built because if these are the ones that are most common. So those are things like a prompt excellence agent that helps you improve your prompts. There's other facilitator agent, there's other agents that we just heard most of our customers asking for. So those are the ones that come in the box. But then when you think of like the spectrum of agents, There's simple agents. People have used the term declarative agents, and this is where you direct the agent toward a specific set of information or documents, or maybe a SharePoint. So this might look like an HR agent that you've directed toward all the HR policies, right? And when a person is interacting with that agent, they can ask how those policies apply to them, and they can ask specific questions. So that's a very simple agent. That's just restating or declaring the information that the agent has been directed to. Then as you get a little more complex, you can have agents that are doing tasks. So that could be like a ServiceNow agent, for example, where you're asking the agent to complete a specific action. And only when prompted does the agent, complete that action, and it can walk you through this level of steps. Those agents tend to be created using Copilot Studio because it's been a little more complex, or you want to be a little more prescriptive with the if-then scenarios. Then you can go all the way to the end of the spectrum, which are more autonomous agents. And these are agents that can be designed to work in the background, not necessarily prompted, but can be working throughout. And we've seen, some of our public facing agents that we've shared about are agents that, for example, bring in new leads. They're doing constant research on the market and on customers, and they raise new leads to the sales teams. And that's value add. So you can build agents along that spectrum, ranging in their level of complexity.
That's a great way to understand. Yeah, that spectrum is really useful to say, where would my use case fit? Is this something that's running in the background, constantly doing things proactively? Is it a bit of a process driven, or is it actually it's meeting notes, right? Everybody needs meeting notes. There's your intelligent recap or your facilitator.
Absolutely, exactly.
So Sarah, that's a really good understanding of kind of the portfolio of options. But if we can, let's get a bit more specific. I know you work with specific customers. Like, what are some actual use cases you've seen where customers have driven value, and what have they done with the AI?
Absolutely. I think a great example of this would be Pets at Home. So they're a pet care company. They have veterinary services. They're also a retailer, and they have used a bevy of different agents across their organization. So, for example, one of them is an integration of their operations, where they use Azure and an agent that is surfacing their Azure services to help surface data that's united from their physical stores, their retail website, and their vet practices. So you can imagine someone who's maybe a store leader who's on the shop floor. Maybe they want to have access to that on the go. They don't want to have to, look at a specific database, or they don't have to want to, interpret a graph. They can just ask this agent to pull these stats really quickly. And in the background, that agent is pulling from all these different sources, but into a format that has been pre-programmed. Another way that Pets at Home has been really powerful is through fraud detection. So they're using this AI agent to assist in retail fraud detection, so that their, fraud detection team can start from something greater than zero. They're sort of being fed cases that already look suspicious.
Okay.
So there's a lot of power there. I mean, other ones are, recommendations based off of the tasks that have been done with a given patient or with a different customer. It can recommend the next best action. So we've just seen them fully embrace this, and you can hear it's across so many different teams and so many different functions. And that gets back to this idea of every business process has an agent, right? So it can range across different departments.
I love that database tip example. I've seen that in the contact center space, where it's actually agents spend a lot of time just swivel chairing between interface A to get the address, interface B to check the delivery code, and interface C to check with DHL or FedEx where it is. And actually an AI, given the right access, can read that information, bring it together and answer it. I guess it sounds like the same scenario there. Exactly.
I'm thinking of the faces that people make when we can kind of showcase this technology and say, hey, yeah, you can hook it up to so many different, it doesn't even have to be a Microsoft product. It could be one of those third-party databases that you want to reach into and that we know you need to do your business.
Yeah.
But to surface it through Copilot means that it's that one consistent experience.
And how have customers been about data access and AI? Because all those scenarios we talked about are we've got a lot of data, we don't know how to make sense of it. So I'm guessing that's a hot topic.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic. And I think the first step that most organizations take is they do some sort of audit via their IT team. They're saying, okay, what is our data security looking like right now? How is our data labeling, our sensitivity labels? How are our permissions, to kind of make sure they have their ducks in a row? And once they do that, they probably do an extremely small scale pilot with some users just to kind of stress test those permissions and make sure they trust the technology. And I think as we've sort of proven that credibility, that the people who have access to given documents, only those with access will be able to surface information from that document with Copilot, but people who do not have access to a document, Copilot can't surface them any information they wouldn't have had access to.
Yeah.
So once they kind of see that in action and feel a little reassured, we've been advocating for, and what we've seen the greater success with is organizations that then just go full force, because it takes some resource to have that adoption and change management project. So doing it at once and with the full estate of people is what we think, drives that greater impact, because people can share with each other. They're all going through the same journey. You're spending that admin and time and money to do that full adoption change management project that one time.
Yeah, it feels very analogous to kind of the Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate movement. I've seen in some organizations, like they get a single use case and they build and build and build. I know there's certain orgs that I've talked to that use it in all sorts of ways and to build all sorts of line of business. It feels like that kind of thing. Like I found a use case, it proven, I can find another one, I can find another one.
Well, it's so true. And oftentimes it's the people who are using the technology, the people who are solving challenges or, coming across prompts that were excellent, that we want to encourage them to share with one another. And that's where the real magic happens. They have greater credibility with one another than any one of us or the IT team trying to imagine their role. They're living it. So when they get to discover something and share with each other, that's when you start to see real scale and excitement.
Yeah, you mentioned at the start of the pod the partnership kind of between the line of business people in the business, marketing, sales, whatever it may be, and IT, and needing the people in the business to want it, because let's be honest, like you want the business to pull through rather than IT to push, and B, them knowing the use cases, like you just spend time be like, what's painful for you? What are options? And I think that's where IT can be the absolute heroes in this scenario, is getting educated, which is a fast moving space at the moment, and then helping tease out and I think not going for the most complex use case day one, just being like, here's a win we can have with AI. Let's take the win and let's, then kind of advocate that around the business. Yeah.
Take those small wins. We say during promptathons that oftentimes a prompt which can save 1 minute 10 times a day is a much better start to using Copilot than having this one masterfully written giant prompt that maybe will solve a 1 hour problem.
Yeah.
But, it takes a lot more trial and error to get to that. So when we're starting out with people, to start with those small problems, those maybe low decision tasks or repetitive tasks, those are some quick wins we can start with.
It's a fun kind of bugbear of our industry that, we like this amazing capability was built and immediately we called it prompt engineering. It's like, if there's any way to turn people off, like call it engineering.
I totally agree. There's this problem with acumens and language that I do think keeps people from trying, when really we're just teaching people a new way to interact with technology. With a traditional search engine, it was keyword search.
Yeah.
And I think people almost take for granted that they just now intuitively type not full sentences into their search engine. They're typing where they're trying to tag words, right? So in the same way that people have learned how to interact with a search engine, maybe they'll learn that they can just speak naturally. Maybe it's voice if they're using the voice capabilities, or typing naturally. And because it's a semantic index, this interrelation of concepts rather than a pure like keyword tag, then Copilot will capture anything and everything that's related to that concept that you're talking about.
And like, Sarah, you spend a lot of time with organizations getting them started. Like it's a lot, right? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of options. And I think there's a lot in the box with Microsoft 365 and whatever the customer has in terms of license level. where would you suggest someone listening starts?
So we've recently announced something called Copilot Chat. And for those eagle-eyed who, and I'm sure you're one of them, that this already existed, right? It's web-grounded chat and it's free. And you can surface it right within Teams. You can surface it on the web. I would say flipping that on for everyone is a first start. And the reason for that is even if people don't have the full magic of Microsoft 365 Copilot, where they have their work context as they're interacting with the technology, or where they can access Copilot in Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, even if they won't have that full functionality, flipping on Copilot Chat at work gets them started on their adoption journey. So it gets them sort of getting used to how to interact with the technology. But it also helps the organization stay safe because you have that enterprise grade security still wrapped around it. So I think first thing to do is flip on Copilot Chat, because then you know that everyone is using generative AI that is safe and within the confines of this secure environment.
And that's in pretty much all the M365 SKUs. So you don't need to be like E5 Super Premium, and even things like Frontline, they have access to that Copilot.
That's right. That's right. If they have a Microsoft login, yes. So that's number one. And then I would say number two is start to approach your business stakeholders to understand, hey, where do we have big problems we want to solve? Who wants to get their hands on this technology? And then you can start scoping out those Microsoft 365 Copilot user groups. But as I said, I think getting past that IT audit, let's say, of like information and security is really important. We don't want to get stuck there because getting them in the hands of people and your business stakeholders is so important. That mapping needs to happen. So you might as well start today.
I mean, the other thing I've seen is it's been surprising how that message of Copilot Chat and the branding, the 3 or 4 brands we've had in the last 2 years, it hasn't really got through. And there's no way people inside your organization aren't using the consumer options. Like they're going to use something. So you're giving them a compliant, safe in the box option. And I find it very hard for any organization to credibly say we haven't turned it on because we're not ready for AI. It's like, well, I mean, you're very trusting your users aren't picking up a consumer option then.
Exactly. We have a stat somewhere about how bring your own AI is not just for Gen Z. We see it across every single demographic that's using AI in the workplace, even if it's not been sanctioned by their organization. So that's a risk, right? Yeah. And unless you're using this sort of enterprise grade product that is going to protect anything that you enter into Copilot, for example, we're not using anything you share to train the model. And that's the difference, right? Is like you can trust that as you're using the power of generative AI, we're not going to then allow that to be exposed outside of the bounds of your organization. I think that's the key message.
Yeah, that's really important. And I think I know actually, everybody at Microsoft has been working on this, but like the ability to report and understand how it's being used seems to have come on leaps and bounds. And also you've got a rev of the success kit as well, I think.
Absolutely. So the Copilot dashboard has been really in development to help organizations, understand which apps are there people using most with Copilot, who are those hero users that we can recruit as the evangelists and the champs that we want to share out. And there's also some really, really like deep data there about where there could be potential use cases as well. So that's the Copilot dashboard. And this goes back to this idea of business value and creating business value. It's not real unless you can measure it, right? So that's what we've done to try to help put that toolkit in the hands of organization. We also have this free resource online called the Copilot Success Kit. It's almost silly to call it one resource because what it is, it's a wrapper around a bunch of different resources from use cases and persona mapping through to launch day materials. So, you don't have to design your own poster. We've done it for you, or we've at least started it for you, all the way to different videos and things that you can learn from on how to roll out Copilot to your organization. So that Copilot Success Kit is huge. And we've actually just totally added a bunch of information to it, including the agents overview guide. So, in line with all these updates and exciting news around agents. So there's a lot going on online. But for those of you who are interested, check out the Copilot Success Kit.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, thanks for taking the time to jump on the pod. I really appreciate how eloquently you decode what's going on. And if it's okay with you, maybe we'll give it 6 months and you can get us updated again on what's new and exciting.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks.